two new Tesla stock upgrades from institutional investors. Adam Jonas of Morgan Stanley reiterated an overweight rating and $410 price target, saying Tesla will weather the storm. And Cantor Fitzgerald also reaffirmed their overweight rating, saying Tesla will rise above other automakers. Third, Drew Baglino, former Tesla Senior Vice President of Powertrain and Energy at Tesla, has formed a new company called Huron that will develop next-generation transformers for the electric grid. Elon Musk had said previously this will be the next bottleneck for AI scaling. Fourth, the Boring Company's new Vegas loop has just opened. This will no doubt soon be driven by autonomous cars. And finally, it looks like Tesla's building a mini city paradise around their Giga Texas factory. We're going to take a look at that. We got Hans Nelson joining us today. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks for having me, Herbert.
So in the turmoil with taxes and the economy and everything that's going on, tariffs, we've had a number of institutional analysts basically buckling and saying that we've got, we're very worried about what's going to happen to Tesla. Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities, he's come out saying that it's really up to Elon. He needs to do something in the next 90 days. And he's reduced his $550 price target to $320 something. I'm going to be doing a show with him in just a couple hours from this video dropping. We'll be doing that at 9 a.m. Pacific time, live stream on this channel. So today, though, we're going to talk about the other two institutional analysts, and but they're sticking their guns. You got here Morgan Stanley, Adam Jonas, which is very surprisingly. He reiterated an overrating and $410 price target on Tesla, lessons from the American Enlightenment. A recent market calamity due in part to the U.S. tariff situation has raised deeper questions among investors about the state of the U.S. economy, the benefits of advanced AI technology, and the evolving geopolitical balance of power. Within our coverage, no other stock is so clearly identified with the volatile debate around trade and politics as Tesla. But regardless of the near-term policy path, we believe the march of embodied AI will see a proliferation of machines embedded with sophisticated robotics that navigate and manipulate three-dimensional physical space powered by agentic software foundation models. At the same time, the propagation of humanoid robots, when compounded over 1 or 2 decades, may change the fundamental nature of production and how economy is defined. The ability to produce labor in a factory as machines make machines with minimal human intervention may alter historical measurements such as dependency ratios, retirement age, and GDP. Just, oh my gosh, wow, how can they stay focused on the beauty of the future of embodied AI while fire is happening all around us now? Kudos to them. That's great. You sound like a true Tesla bull, long-term bull.
I'm just struck by how friggin' bipolar Adam Jonas can be. Like, he can be so brilliant. And then 5 minutes later, be asking Elon, so are you going to do LiDAR on your cars? Maybe please answer this question that we've already talked about 100 times. I just don't understand, but I have to agree with his analysis on this, that, that is overwhelmingly where the future is headed. And I think one of the things he didn't mention here, but that I would add, is that not only is Elon and Tesla, they're focused on these big macro trends that are the most important trends to get right over the coming decades, and they're positioned extremely well in those things. They also just happen to be the most insulated from these tariff negotiation, explosive downstream consequences of any of their competitors as well. Now, you do have to admit that their multiple has a lot of execution that's priced in, and these challenges, while maybe Tesla is better insulated from them than other companies, well, they better be, because the market says they should be doing better than these other companies. And so, maybe it's not necessarily a comparative advantage for them compared to their PE ratios, but they're still in a good position. And I think one of the big takeaways in all of the tariff stuff is that as long as we don't get into hot war, we are just rebalancing the trade relationship of the entire world. And all of this tariff negotiation is really just about the United States and China, and what the relationship of everyone in between the United States and China is. Like, are people going to be oriented more towards the United States, or are they going to be oriented more towards China? And China has two main things going for it right now. One of them is they have an incredible people, an incredible culture, an incredible labor force, incredible intelligence, and incredible drive and hunger. And I think those things on their own are just dramatically beneficial to the rest of the world. And I'm super excited to see just the reduction of poverty that has occurred over the
Mhm.
last 30 some years in China, really largely due to the policies of Deng Xiaoping. But one of the things we also have to recognize is that Xi Jinping is no Deng Xiaoping, and that their orientation towards the rest of the world and the CCP specifically engages in a lot of unfair practices in many ways. And, people will say, well, the United States is also kind of a shady actor in a lot of ways, and that is absolutely true. At the level of global geopolitics, there are no saints. It's only, mafia versus mafia. But with that being said, I think the experience of a lot of countries who have come under the influence of the CCP and their policies and their technology really feel like it's a very uncomfortable relationship to be in. And so I
Mhm.
think that overall that the US is probably going to come out ahead in this rebalancing. That I think more people, while they're going to be a lot of bluster about how, this is super unfair of the US to be leveraging all of these trade imbalances against them, and we need a world of fair trade, and I believe all of that's true as well. That ultimately I think people are going to orient more towards the United States and more away from China. And as long as we don't end up in hot war, I think that that's actually going to be net good for the vast majority of people on earth. So we'll just have to see where that goes. One of the things that implicates though is labor, and that's where I come back to Adam Jonas,
Mhm.
that as we are going towards a world where we have artificial general intelligence and we have robotics, and the two of those things come together both in the humanoid form factor but also in many other form factors. um, the strategic importance of having cheap labor both in China but also in much of the rest of the world, in Vietnam, and Africa has the potential to be a source of inexpensive labor as well. That strategic advantage that those countries have is going to
Yeah.
be less strategically important 10
Over
years from
time.
now than it is
Yeah.
today. And that's also one of these fundamental tensions that is shaping the way that the world is playing out. It's also shaping the way these negotiations play out. And so it's a very fraught time. And it's just hard to keep my brain
Yeah.
even partially wrapped around all of these things. But that's where I agree with Adam that, there's a lot of things that I can't predict, but what I can say is that automated manufacturing, automated labor through artificial general intelligence and robotics is going to be much, much more important, and labor is going to be much less important. And so being positioned in a name like Tesla is like one of the most de-risked things that I could possibly do in this moment.
Well said. Tesla is, I hope the governments understand, and I think they do, right? How important Tesla is because it is one of the top manufacturers of humanoid robots and who can do it at scale. And so they are going to be very powerful and very important for America or whichever country allows them to build a factory there. It's going to be very, very important for them. So I think Tesla is well positioned. We'll see, but they're also caught in the crossfire. And I think we're hearing rumors now that China is actually reaching out to companies like Tesla and others to help negotiate with the US government. And of course, we know that Elon is right in the middle of all this. So hopefully it's a positive because it can go either way. It can go either
Yeah,
way.
and one of the cool things in that, people are obviously going to have a lot of different feelings about whether Elon should be in between President Trump and President
Yeah.
Xi and all of that. And I'm not really going to comment on that part specifically. One of the things that I will say that I think is bodes well in that is that Elon has a lot of leverage in those relationships, both with Trump and with President Xi, and the strategic importance of what he brings to the table for the world and by extension for China, by extension to the United States, puts him in a position where he's not really beholden to either of them fully. And that independence that he can assert because of the assets that he holds within XAI, the assets that he holds within SpaceX, which, people, I made a post on this other day, there's really no difference between the ability to colonize Mars and the
Mm.
ability to project overwhelming military force anywhere on the United or anywhere on the globe
Wow.
in very short order of time.
Wow.
And so, that asset is strategically important on par with nukes, and, potentially even more so. And his dominance in that technology field then gives him leverage in negotiations with China, in conversations with President Trump, um, and legitimacy that, while people may not like him, they may not want to deal with him, they may want to tell him to go screw off and get out of here, get out of my face. The fact of the matter is that he holds enough of the cards on the global stage to where they can't. And that hopefully will then work out to the benefit of everyone, is he can bring a different perspective to these negotiations and these conversations than would otherwise be present. And his, especially in his
Mm.
expertise in artificial intelligence, where that's going to go and how that's going to shape the world moving forward. I don't think that either President Trump or President Xi are particularly in a position to have a good handle on that topic. And I think it's going to be one of the most important topics moving forward. So I'm really glad that Elon has a seat at the table for these conversations to bring that perspective into play.
Yeah. Great conversation. And glad that Morgan Stanley's looked at it the same way, which is this is so much bigger than just these kind of like, okay, we, obviously the tariff war is massive right now. It's have huge, market turmoil, but this is strategically important for all sorts of things that you just talked about. So let's take a look at Cantor Fitzgerald, another institutional analyst who's maintaining Tesla stock overweight rating. They're saying that the valuation of Tesla at the $770 billion market cap, it's but because its strategic focus, Tesla's on domestic sourcing and extensive vertical integration, even trading at a PE ratio of 108, it positions Tesla favorably compared to other automakers. So again, reducing exposure to import tariffs. So they get that, they understand that, and they're going to stick by Tesla, saying they're going to be the least affected by this. By sourcing materials domestically, keeping a significant portion of its production process in-house, Tesla aims to maintain stability and efficiency in its operation, the least to be impacted. Thank you to Tesla's vertical integration allows them to do this. So even the slip in Tesla stock price, Cantor Fitzgerald reiterates their overweight rating. They have confidence, long-term prospects, and so there's another one. It's good.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that one. I think in a world where we don't really know what the whole tariff situation is going to end up being on the other side of all these negotiations. So there's really kind of two possibilities. One of them is a world where we have really significantly higher tariffs than we started out with at the beginning of this year, and that dampens free trade around the world. Or the other scenario is, hey, we're actually able to negotiate less trade barriers around the world than we started out with. And while, there might be specific tariffs that are higher here and lower there, that net, it's actually a more free trade world. Because that's definitely not the world that existed in January. The United States was the free trade partner with most of the world, and everyone else had lots of tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers with us. And so it wasn't like, the world was a free trade believer. So in either of those scenarios, though, I think Tesla is in a pretty good position relative to their peers. And I think that de-risks their investment better, because if there's lower trade barriers, then they're basically still in a good position to continue to grow. Their control on costs makes them more competitive relative to people like GM and Ford. They have better technology, so if they can execute on their growth plans where they're rolling out these factories and they're able to produce cars at lower prices and higher volumes, then hey, that's really exciting for the market. On the flip side, hey, if trade starts to meaningfully reduce, we've got more tariffs, The economics of a lot of things are destroyed. Well, the economics of those things impact these other companies more. So they impact Ford more, they impact GM more, they impact, or they're certainly going to impact China in a very terrible way. And that is, most of the competition that the market assigns that's coming for Tesla supposedly is these Chinese companies like BYD. And so if people can say, hey, well, BYD competitive threat, that's kind of off the table. And even the gas cars that Tesla is, selling their EVs in competition against, now those are going to get to be a lot more expensive. And yes, the Tesla is going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's not going to be nearly as much more expensive as a Ford F-150 gets. Then the relative pricing power that Tesla has goes up, and they can earn higher margins even if they don't necessarily grow volumes, and their earnings can go up. And so in that world, it is also a de-risked investment. And it feels like it's safe. And we went through this during COVID, that these companies that the market looked at as being resilient and innovative and able to deal with rapidly changing situations on the ground, capital just left everywhere else and went to those places because those places felt the safest of anything else that was out there and available. And I think that we could be entering a world where something similar is going to play out if things really start to go much more poorly than the market is kind of pricing in right now.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that BYD, they don't have factories in the US. They don't have factories in Europe. I think they were about to build one in Hungary or something like that. And they're trying to. And they do have factories like in other countries and all that. But it's critical that they have localized supply chains, local development, like Tesla does, to be least affected by these tariff.
Well, and one of the things that you can be certain of is that part of the negotiations that are happening with all of these countries, the reason that Trump put tariffs on everyone, including the penguins, is because China is the main competitive threat that he's looking at. And he doesn't want there to be any loopholes through which China can pass through into the United States. And so like Vietnam is a good example of this, that they have had a massive growth in their economy recently. But then when you break out the numbers, and you see that, wow, they're all of a sudden they're just importing way more stuff to the United States. And where did all this stuff come from? And then you're like, oh, wow, they're running a huge trade surplus. Trade surplus to us, the United States. We're at a deficit with them, but they're getting all that stuff from China. And China is basically using Vietnam as a pass through to produce stuff, go through Vietnam, come to the United States, and they can avoid these types of things. And so BYD's plants in other countries, whether that's in Europe or wherever, Trump is talking to those countries specifically and saying, hey, what I want from you is, hey, you and I are going to have a no tariff relationship. That's what we want. We want free trade. You go to zero, we'll go to zero. But I can't go to zero with you if going to zero with you is then a pass through for China. And so you have to impose a tariff on China. Not only do you have to lower your tariffs on the US to zero, you have to impose a new tariff on China of whatever the tariff needs to be in order to mitigate how much trade China is using that country to move to the United States. And so negotiations like that are going to be a challenge for BYD, because it doesn't matter that unless they're in the United States, these negotiations will try to box them out of our market.
Interesting. Very good points. Okay. Very high level discussion here. The other thing that's going to become very important at an economic and political warfare scenario here is AI supremacy. And these data centers are going to be very critical. Elon also warned about it. And so there's this Drew Baglino. He's the ex-Tesla senior vice president of powertrain and energy at Tesla for many years. He left Tesla. Well, he's just announced he is starting a new company called Huron. They're going to generate next generation transformers for electric grid. And he's raising $50 million Series A. He probably raised all of it from Elon to develop these next gen transformers for electric grids. Basically, every country, sovereign, every city, every company, our big companies will need their own AI data centers. And these things require so much power. But these are transformers, and Elon himself, here's another version of the transformers here, said, as I said a few years ago, the AI scaling constraint will move from chips, which is what it is now. That's why you're seeing NVIDIA skyrocket, to voltage transformers. And that's what Drew is building here, to electricity generation. And then he's referring to this development below. This is worrying for US leadership in AI long term. This project will give China an unbelievable edge for decades in energy dominance costs. $137 billion, which is just 20% of a single year of the Pentagon budget. Is there any reason we couldn't slash 20% of the Pentagon budget to create an annual Great Works Fund? Was he referring to, or is it China created a Great Works Fund? Yeah.
So China is planning to build a huge hydropower dam that's going to produce a whole bunch. Like they're going to dam up one of the rivers. It's going to be a massive amount of water that they are able to store, and then the power that they can generate from that dam is going to be very, very, very large. And this is one of the talking points that you hear pretty extensively from the All In podcast. We've heard it from Elon that, at some point, compute power is a function of electricity. And if one country has way more electricity generation capacity than another country, then that gives them an edge in this AI race. And China has definitely set this as a strategic priority for the country. There's several. Power is one of them. Manufacturing is one of them. AI is one of them. Drones, one of them. Battery technology, also one of them. They understand the importance of silicon fabrication and chips as well. And so, they're really trying to reconfigure their economy around these technologies that they determine to be strategically imperative in the 21st century and moving forward. One of the challenges that the United States has is that, man, we are way burdened down with way too many regulations and environmental protection concerns that make it very hard for us to build electricity generation here in the United States. But Drew's thing is actually even before that. Like we have electricity generation capacity currently. We're going to be adding a whole bunch more, as we add renewables, that changes the mix of the type of generation that we have. And it has a need for voltage transformers, and those voltage transformers just change. So power is made up of two components. You got current and you have voltage. And if you multiply your current by your voltage, basically you get what the power is going to be. And so if you want to send a lot of power over a long distance, then you want that to happen at very high voltage and very low current, because the current produces heat, and the heat is a loss. And so if you want to transmit that power as efficiently as possible, it needs to happen at the highest voltage possible, but the lowest current possible. So these power lines that you see that are huge and they go very long distances, all of that stuff is happening at tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of volts. But then when it gets to your house, it's 110 volts. And so, it has to come down a long ways from 35,000 volts or, 100,000 volts down to 110 volts. And transformers are the things that actually make that conversion to where they lower the voltage and then they increase the current. And one of the reasons that you don't want to have 35 kV coming out of your electrical outlet in your house is that that's very, very, very dangerous. This is why linemen and people who work on these electrical grids, they're very specially trained. It's a very dangerous job, because that high current stuff, or not high current, but high voltage stuff is very dangerous. I mean, high current stuff is also very dangerous, but dangerous in a different way. And anyways, all of that said, we have to constantly transform the ratio between the voltage and the current for different applications. And so one of the things that is going to bottleneck our ability to grow our grid overall is, do we have enough transformers? And then the other thing is, are those transformers that we have, are they modern enough, and are they resistant enough to attacks that they don't create failure points? And one of the vulnerabilities that the United States has, and many, many countries have, is that, if just a few well-placed attacks on central nodes in a power grid can cause these cascading failures where an entire state could be without power. And transformers are kind of critical pieces in that it's the ability to change that voltage from one thing to the other. Like those are the points that can be attacked that then cause these massive cascading failures. And we don't currently have a whole lot of these transformers that are sitting around. If something happens to, 10% of the transformers in the United States, we don't have enough to go around and just replace those right away overnight. And that is a strategic vulnerability that we have from a national security standpoint. And so we need more voltage transformers so that we can grow the amount of power, so that we can have power for AI. And we also need it so that if something goes wrong, that we don't descend into an Armageddon situation overnight. And so this is a very, very, very important job. And I'm really glad that someone like Drew Baglino is taking this on. And I am excited to see what comes out of this. What I hope is that we can develop a fully sovereign supply chain for transformers that are fully EMP hardened and are very resilient to cyber attacks, and that these transformers can be something that we can make very rapidly at low costs, and that through doing that we can make our energy grid much more robust and much more scalable.
Thank you so much, Hans. You have tremendous amount of knowledge, great explanation. I didn't know 90% of what you talked about. Now I do. I just look at it from a high level. You can see that Elon has these grand visions. He understands what's coming, what are the next bottlenecks, and it almost as if he's putting his players into place. You had J.B. Straubel, a co-founder of Tesla years ago. He's launched renewable energy, right? Redmond Materials. Then you've got this guy, Drew Baglino, launching.
Who was JB's right-hand man for a long time and then took JB's place when JB left.
Drew Baglino. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he trains them, teaches them, gets them to, not that he might obviously, these gentlemen themselves came up with this, but it's the next big thing that's required. You have these transformers from Drew Baglino. You have this, you have Boring Company, and you have these things that Elon's working on that just takes years, but then all of a sudden it becomes so critical. So here's a Boring Company. They just launched a new loop in Vegas between the casinos Encore and the Wynn Extension Tunnel that just opened up. So let's go take a look at that. What is it now? It came from this person, Michelle, from the Vegas Sphere. Boring Company, Vegas Loop, Encore Wynn Extension. It's open, one-way tunnel to Encore from Central Hall. $6.25 round trip, just opened about a quarter mile. And he took a video of it. And it's just, still driven through... by a Model X probably, but eventually you can tell that this is going to be headed towards an autonomous future. But it's starting to happen, right? These kinds of, So, okay. So then you've got Elon saying, awesome. And then finally we have this, which is Tesla released some official renders and plans of its ecological paradise at Giga Texas. I didn't even know they were working on this, but basically they're trying to make Giga Texas almost like a beautiful paradise city, right? 25 miles of new walking trails, 18 miles of new bike trails, a waterfront, the Tesla Expo and sports complex, riverfront boardwalk, fishing areas, a playground and orchard, a riverfront, 3.78 miles of it, direct access from Giga Texas, 290 acres of waterfront green space, 8 wildlife corridors. I mean, this is great. 20,000 households would benefit from its ecological paradise in Southeast Austin. So this is the photos and pictures associated with this. It's great. I mean, it's basically turning a factory into a mini city, which is nice whenever you see that. And they're very concerned about the environment. So Elon himself said this is a connected trail system. Here's the photos that they released. Reclaimed water, right? And then you got Elon saying, this is going to be awesome. So you initially said earlier something about building things on Mars. I guess they're trying to just, again, doing good things. Sounds right.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure this was definitely part of the negotiating process
Mm,
when Tesla brought their factory to Austin in the first place. And Austin's like, well, we're going to let you build here. We're going to give you all these concessions for taxes. What are you going to do for us? And, part of what they're doing is they've got a great job training program that utilizes some of the local high schools, and they have direct relationships with just the education system there in general. I know that was part of really securing that deal. But something like this is also really important, that over time, like being able to provide access to this for the public, this is going to be something that attracts tourism. Like, their presence in general is going to attract tourism. This is really going to take the quality of that experience up to the next level. And then as a company that is kind of, built around the ecological hopes of trying to be good for the environment, then something like this obviously not only makes sense, it seems like it's core to the mission, and you want to actually put your money where your mouth is and do some cool things. And so it's really just an across the board win-win-win type of a thing, and it's something that I'm looking forward to visiting soon, hopefully.
all right. Well, thank you so much for a great show, Hans. I mean, when I look at this, where you're right in the middle of this turmoil, right? Tax wars and just the economy is a kind of mess, but keep your focus, right? Tesla, you got Morgan Stanley, Cantor Fitzgerald. They're saying, hey, Tesla is going to be fine. Look forward to what the future is going to look like. You got Drew Baglino starting a new company that's going to focus on the AI warehouse data centers. I'm glad that it's an American company that's doing something like this to protect, like you explained, how important transformers are. Yep, boring company in these kind of city paradises. This kind of gives you a glimpse of what the future could be. Hopefully,
Yep.
it can be more like a utopia. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But boy,
yeah, as long as we don't get into a hot war with China, and
yeah,
no one invades Taiwan, then I think things are actually, I'm really excited about the possibilities for the future. I think right now we're in a very pivotal moment where we're either going to move in the direction of a much more positive world or a much more scary world. And so I think people should be wise in the way that they position themselves, so that they can kind of deal with the scenario as it plays out either way.
Mhm,
But I think that the you know majority, I think it's much more likely that we're moving towards a positive future. It's just that the negative future likelihood is not zero, and so
mhm,
people need to position themselves accordingly. Be wise, try to make intelligent and smart financial decisions in these moments. Um, don't lose hope, because I think it's much more likely that we're moving towards a good future. But yeah, don't be
mhm.
naive either.
Thank you so much, Hans. Follow him on his YouTube channel, Hans C. Nelson. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.